Alexis had always felt like an outsider, even in a place that was meant to feel like home. The sprawling colony on the distant planet, with its mix of humans and alien species, was far from a place of comfort for someone like her. Though it was a place of opportunity and endless exploration, Alexis had always had a nagging sense of something being amiss. It wasn't that she didn't fit in. In fact, she was well-liked, worked hard, and got along with everyone. But there was something about the way people looked at her, something strange, that she couldn't quite put her finger on. At first, it had been subtle. She would walk through the busy central square of the colony's capital city, catching the glances of those she passed. People would smile, wave, or nod, but there was always something more. It was like they were looking past her or maybe through her, as if they were sizing her up, trying to figure out something they didn't quite understand. It was nothing overt, nothing that would raise alarms, but it nagged at her every time. When she first arrived in the colony, she had been excited. It was a new start, a chance to leave behind the past and begin again. The promise of a new world, a new life, filled her with anticipation. But that feeling of excitement had faded slowly as she realized that the colony, while full of diverse and fascinating beings, wasn't quite the place she had imagined. The people were polite, but distant. There were always whispers, quiet conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered the room. A few times, she had caught people's eyes, only to see them quickly avert their gaze as if they were caught doing something they shouldn't. But that was all. No one ever said anything to her. No one ever explained why. She had chalked it up to her own insecurities at first. Maybe she was overthinking things. After all, she had always been a little self-conscious, even in her previous life back on Earth. But the longer she lived in the colony, the more she realized that this wasn't just her imagination. Something was off. She wasn't sure what it was, but she knew deep down that she was the subject of some kind of attention, and it wasn't the kind of attention anyone would want. One day, while walking through the colony's main promenade, Alexis felt the familiar eyes on her. She glanced up and met the gaze of one of the colony's engineers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp, yellow eyes. He smiled politely, but it wasn't the usual friendly smile. His smile was colder, almost calculating. He held her gaze for a moment too long, and Alexis quickly looked away. It was just that kind of thing that had been happening more and more lately. Everywhere she went, she felt like people were looking at her differently, and it wasn't the usual kind of look one might get in a place like this, a place that thrived on diversity. Alexis worked alongside species from every corner of the galaxy, from the towering insectoid X-Riths to the graceful, winged Elorians. But it was never them. It was always the humans, or more specifically, the higher-ups within the colony's government and military. They were the ones who seemed to watch her too closely, as if waiting for something. She didn't know what, but she felt it. She had tried to ask her friends, tried to get some answers, but they always gave her the same response. "You're imagining things, Alexis. There's nothing weird going on." But she knew better. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, every time she crossed paths with certain people. The atmosphere in the colony was shifting, and Alexis was at the center of it without knowing why. It all came to a head one evening when she was summoned to the colony's central hub. The central hub was a grand, open building where most of the colony's important meetings took place. From the moment she entered the building, Alexis felt the weight of eyes on her. The space was filled with the colony's leaders, all standing in clusters and talking in hushed voices. As she made her way through the crowd, she couldn't help but notice how they all seemed to glance up as she passed, their conversations halting just as she neared. She tried to ignore it, but the sensation was overpowering. Finally, she reached the front of the room, where Commander Kalen, one of the highest-ranking officials in the colony, stood waiting for her. Kalen was tall and imposing, with the alien features of his species, a race of beings known for their keen minds and cold, calculated demeanor. His eyes, a striking shade of purple, fixed on Alexis with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. She had interacted with him only a few times before, always as part of a larger group, but this time it was just the two of them. "Alexis," Kalen said, his voice low and steady, "I need you to come with me." There was no question in his tone, no room for discussion. Alexis followed him through the large doors and into a private office, a place she had never been before. Once inside, Kalen turned to face her, his posture rigid and authoritative. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, his eyes never leaving hers. Alexis shook her head, her heart pounding. No, I don't, but I'm starting to get the feeling that something strange is going on. Kalen nodded, his expression unreadable. It's not your imagination. You've been selected for the mating lottery. The words hit Alexis like a slap to the face. Mating lottery? She had heard the term before, but she didn't understand what it meant. The colony had always been a place of diversity and openness, where relationships between species were common and encouraged. But a lottery. That was something else entirely. You've been chosen, Kalen continued, his tone now a bit more solemn. This lottery is an essential part of the colony's social structure. It's designed to strengthen ties between the human and alien populations, ensuring that our future is united. Alexis frowned, her mind racing. What do you mean, chosen? I didn't sign up for anything like this. Kalen's eyes softened for the first time, though his face remained stoic. It's not something you can sign up for. The lottery is a way of ensuring that every person in the colony is connected, both emotionally and biologically, to someone outside their immediate circle. You will be paired with a mate, someone who will help form this connection. Alexis was still processing his words, but the weight of the situation was starting to sink in. She had been randomly selected for some kind of biological pairing. It didn't make sense. She had never been told about any such lottery, and yet here she was, the subject of a plan she didn't even know existed. "And who is this mate?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kalen hesitated for a moment before replying. "Commander Terran, you've met him before." Her mind raced as she tried to recall the commander's face. Terran was another high-ranking official, known for his cold demeanor and stoic presence. He was a leader among leaders, someone who commanded respect without saying a word. The thought of being paired with him, someone who held so much power, felt like a strange and terrifying twist of fate. "I don't understand," Alexis muttered, her voice shaking. "Why me? Why was I chosen?" Kalen's gaze remained fixed on her, his expression unreadable. "The lottery is never truly random. You were selected because you have something that Commander Terran needs. There's more at play here than you understand." The cryptic response left Alexis with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. She wasn't just a participant in some random event. She was part of something far bigger, and she was about to become a pawn in a game she didn't even know existed. Alexis sat in her small apartment later that night, her mind spinning. The announcement of her being chosen for the mating lottery still felt like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. She had tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself that it was all just some misunderstanding. But deep down, she knew it was. The events of the past few hours kept replaying in her head, each word that Commander Kalen had said echoing in her ears. She couldn't make sense of it. She didn't understand why she had been chosen, or why the colony even had something like this in place. The idea of being paired with Commander Terran made her stomach turn, and yet there was no getting around it. She was part of this now. The colony had always been full of diversity. Humans, aliens, hybrids, every being from a different corner of the galaxy seemed to have found a home here. It was meant to be a utopia, a place where species could coexist and share knowledge. But now, Alexis was starting to see that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. The lottery, the bond, the strange looks people had given her for weeks. It was all connected, but she still didn't know how. Her apartment was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the colony's power grid running through the walls. She sat on the couch, staring at her hands, deep in thought. She had lived here for years now, and in all that time she had never once heard of the mating lottery. No one had ever mentioned it, not once. And yet here she was, involved in it as if it were the most normal thing in the world. How could something so important, so personal, be kept hidden like this? It didn't make sense. The idea of a lottery itself seemed absurd. The colony was supposed to be progressive, forward-thinking, open-minded. The notion that they needed a lottery to pair people up for mating was primitive, almost barbaric. Alexis had always thought of herself as independent. She didn't need someone to complete her, certainly not someone chosen for her by a random draw. But as the hours passed, she began to understand that it wasn't just about reproduction. There was more to it, something deeper, something she had yet to figure out. She tried to distract herself. Her thoughts were like a whirlpool, dragging her deeper and deeper into confusion. Alexis had worked hard to build a life here in the colony. She had made friends, established a solid career in the research division, and even begun to feel like she had found a place where she could truly belong. But now, with one announcement, it all seemed like it was unraveling. The next morning, Alexis decided to get some answers. She wasn't sure who to ask, but she needed to know what was really going on. She couldn't just accept this lottery and move forward without understanding what it meant. The colony's leaders had to know more than they were telling her. Kalen had given her some information, but it wasn't enough. She walked through the busy streets of the colony, trying to ignore the curious glances of the residents as she passed. There was no escaping it. No matter where she went, it felt like everyone was watching her, judging her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the way people interacted with her. Even her closest colleagues seemed to be avoiding her, their faces tight with tension. She had never felt so isolated, so alone, in a place that was supposed to feel like home. Her first stop was the colony's public records office. It was a large, sterile building, filled with rows of data terminals and display screens showing all manner of information about the colony's governance, resources, and social systems. She approached the desk, where a young woman was seated, tapping away at her console. The woman looked up as Alexis approached, her eyes widening for a moment before she quickly composed herself. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice polite but distant. Alexis hesitated. She didn't know how to start. "I need information about the mating lottery," she said, her voice low. "I've been selected, and I need to understand what that means." The woman's expression changed instantly. Her eyes darted to the side as though checking for someone before she leaned forward. "You've been selected," she whispered, her tone urgent. "You don't know what you're getting into." Alexis felt a wave of frustration wash over her. "Exactly, that's why I'm here. I need to understand this lottery. Why was I chosen? What does it mean to be paired with someone?" The woman glanced around again before speaking in a hushed voice. "It's not as simple as they make it sound. The lottery isn't just about pairing people for reproduction. It's about control. The colony has always used it as a way to maintain power, to create certain bonds between the most influential people and outsiders. But you wouldn't know that, would you?" Alexis's heart skipped a beat. "Control? What do you mean?" The woman bit her lip, clearly debating whether to continue. "You're not just being paired with Commander Terran for the sake of the colony's future. They want to bind you to him, emotionally, mentally. It's all part of a larger plan to keep the power within the hands of a select few. The mating lottery isn't random. It's a tool, a weapon." Alexis's mind raced as she processed the woman's words. She had suspected something was off, but hearing it confirmed in such a blunt manner made her stomach twist. "So what, they just pick people and force them into these bonds?" The woman looked around once more before speaking again. "Not exactly, but it's not a choice. People who are selected have no say in the matter, and if you try to refuse the bond, it's not like they'll just let you go. They'll find a way to make you comply." A chill ran down Alexis's spine. She had no idea things were this bad. She thought the lottery was some kind of harmless tradition, but now she saw it for what it really was, a way to control the colony's population and keep power in the hands of the elite. It wasn't just about creating bonds between species. It was about manipulating people to further the agendas of those in control. "I don't want to be part of this," Alexis said, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't sign up for any of this." The woman's face softened with sympathy. "I know, but there's no easy way out. Once you're chosen, the bond is almost impossible to break. You have to go through with it, or they'll make you regret it." Alexis turned away from the desk, feeling more lost than ever. The woman's words echoed in her mind as she walked back through the streets. She didn't know what to do, where to turn. She had never been the type to just accept things, especially when they didn't feel right. But this was different. The colony was a system, and she was just a cog in it. She couldn't fight the system alone. She needed help. But who could she trust? As she wandered through the colony's bustling corridors, Alexis found herself back at the central hub. She stood in front of the building where the lottery had been announced the day before, her mind whirling with 100 different thoughts. She had to figure this out. She couldn't just sit back and let herself be controlled. But what could she do? How could she fight something this big, this deeply ingrained in the fabric of the colony? Just then, she heard a voice behind her. "Alexis!" She spun around to find Kalen standing there, his expression unreadable. She had expected to see him again. He was part of this, after all, but seeing him in person now, after everything she had learned, made her feel a deep sense of unease. "Commander," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I need answers." Kalen didn't speak immediately. He stepped closer, his presence imposing. "I know you're confused," he said quietly. "But this is the way things have always been. The mating lottery is a necessary part of our colony's survival. You were chosen because you're important, Alexis. You have a role to play here." Alexis's heart pounded. She took a step back, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her. "A role? I didn't ask for this." Kalen's gaze softened, but his tone remained firm. "I know, but it's too late to turn back now. You will be paired with Commander Terran, and that's the way it has to be." Her mind spun as she tried to comprehend his words. "And if I refuse?" Kalen's eyes darkened. "You don't have a choice. Neither of us does. This is bigger than us. You'll understand soon enough." Alexis felt trapped, her options closing in around her. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to make her own choices. But now, it felt like that independence was being ripped away from her, piece by piece. And no matter how hard she tried to fight it, she couldn't escape the feeling that there was nothing she could do. The days after her meeting with Kalen felt like an endless blur of confusion and frustration. Alexis could hardly focus on anything. Every time she tried to distract herself, the thought of the mating lottery and her fate kept creeping back into her mind. She didn't want to accept it, but the truth was becoming clearer with every passing moment. There was no way out. She had been chosen, and the bond she was supposed to form with Commander Terran was inevitable. The idea of being mentally and emotionally connected to someone she barely knew, let alone someone as powerful and distant as Terran, made her skin crawl. She had tried to seek answers from other people in the colony, but every conversation led to the same result: nothing. People were tight-lipped, unwilling to speak freely about the lottery or its true purpose. The more Alexis tried to dig, the more it seemed like the colony was closing in around her. No one wanted to help, and she was beginning to feel more and more isolated. One evening, after a long day of avoiding questions and pretending everything was normal, Alexis sat alone in her apartment, staring out the window. The colony's lights illuminated the streets below, casting an eerie glow on the busy, bustling city outside. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, everything had seemed so promising. The thought of a new life, of making a fresh start in a new colony, had seemed so exciting. Now it felt like a trap. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime at the door. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of who it could be. She wasn't expecting anyone, and after the strange events of the past few days, she wasn't sure she wanted to see anyone. But the chime sounded again, more insistent this time. Reluctantly, Alexis stood and walked to the door. She opened it, and to her surprise, standing in the doorway was Kalen. "Commander," Alexis said, her voice cold, though she tried to hide her surprise. "What are you doing here?" Kalen stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving little room for argument. "It's time you understood what's really going on." Alexis's heart skipped a beat. She didn't want to hear more from him, not after everything he had told her already, but she knew there was no avoiding this. Kalen wasn't someone who took no for an answer. She stepped back, allowing him to enter. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it?" "What else do you need to tell me?" Kalen closed the door behind him, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's not just about the lottery. It's about power, control, and the future of the colony." Alexis frowned, still trying to process everything he had already told her. "I thought you already told me everything. The lottery is a way to pair people up for reproduction. That's what you said." Kalen shook his head. "That's the official explanation, but the truth is far more complicated than that. The lottery is a tool to maintain control. It's not just about reproduction. It's about creating bonds between certain individuals, people who can be trusted to carry out the colony's agenda." Alexis stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. "So you're telling me that I'm just a pawn in some game? That my whole life here, everything I've worked for, has been a lie?" Kalen's expression softened, but only slightly. "No, Alexis, you're more than a pawn. You're a key part of the plan. You've been chosen because of your unique position in the colony. You're a human, someone from Earth who has no previous ties to the politics and power struggles of this place. You represent something pure, a fresh start." Alexis shook her head in disbelief. "A fresh start? You mean I'm a tool for you to use to keep control?" That's what you're saying? Kalen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked away, his gaze distant for a moment. It's not that simple, he said softly. The colony's leadership is made up of a small group of powerful individuals who have manipulated the system for their own benefit. They've been doing it for years. The lottery was created as a way to ensure that certain people remained in power, that their influence would continue to grow. And you? Alexis asked, her voice shaking with anger. You're a part of that? You're helping them control everything. Kalen met her gaze again, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of regret and resolve. I didn't create the system, Alexis, but I'm part of it. I've been part of it for a long time. I've tried to change things from within, but the system is too strong. It's bigger than any one person. Alexis crossed her arms, trying to suppress the growing feeling of betrayal. So I'm supposed to just accept this, to accept that my life is being controlled by a group of people who think they can do whatever they want. Kalen's expression hardened. That's why we need you. We need someone like you to help us change things. You're the key to breaking the system. But you have to play along for now. You have to accept the bond with Commander Terran. Only then will you be in a position to help us. Alexis's mind was spinning. Everything Kalen said seemed to contradict everything she had believed about the colony. She had always thought of this place as a progressive society, a place where people from all walks of life could come together and live peacefully. But now she realized it was just as corrupt and power-hungry as any other society, and she was caught in the middle of it. I don't know if I can do this, Alexis said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can go through with it. The bond, the lottery, it all feels wrong. Kalen stepped closer to her, his tone softening. I know it's hard to understand right now, but I'm asking you to trust me, trust that we can make things better together. Alexis felt a pang of doubt. She didn't know if she could trust him, or anyone in the colony for that matter. But she also knew that if she didn't take a stand, nothing would ever change. She couldn't let herself be a part of this corrupt system, no matter how hard it seemed. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. I'll play along, but I won't stop fighting. I won't stop trying to find a way out. Kalen nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I knew you'd understand. As Alexis stood there, her mind racing with 1,000 different thoughts, she knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she wasn't going to give up. She would fight for what was right, no matter the cost. Later that night, as Alexis lay in bed, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She had agreed to the bond, to the plan, but something inside her was still uneasy. She didn't trust Kalen completely, and she certainly didn't trust the colony's leaders. But she knew that she had to play along for now. She had no other choice. The next day, the announcement was made. The entire colony gathered in the central square, where a massive hologram flickered to life, displaying the names of those who had been selected for the mating lottery. Alexis's name appeared on the screen, followed by Commander Terran's. The crowd erupted into applause, and Alexis felt the eyes of everyone in the square turned toward her. It was as if the entire colony was watching her, waiting to see how she would react. She forced herself to stand tall, to maintain her composure, but inside she was trembling. She had agreed to this, but the reality of the situation was now hitting her full force. She glanced at Commander Terran, who stood at the front of the crowd, his expression unreadable. He didn't look pleased or excited. He looked indifferent, as though this was just another duty to him. But Alexis could see the power in his eyes, the control he held over the colony, over her. For a moment, she wondered if she had made the right decision. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back now. The bond was happening, whether she wanted it or not. The days following the announcement were a blur of confusion, frustration, and uncertainty. Alexis had agreed to play along, to follow the path that had been laid out for her. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she could continue pretending everything was normal. The bond with Commander Terran was something she could never fully accept, no matter how much she tried to convince herself that it was for the greater good. The colony, once a place of promise and new beginnings, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in around her. The more Alexis tried to ignore the weight of the situation, the more it seemed to follow her, lurking in every corner of her mind, every conversation, every glance from the people around her. She had become the colony's subject of fascination, its focus of attention, and no matter how hard she tried to distance herself from it, she couldn't escape. Each day, the tension in the colony grew. Alexis could feel it in the air, thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. The mating lottery was just the beginning, the first step in a much larger, much more dangerous game. She had learned that the lottery was not just a random event, but a tool designed to maintain control, to keep power in the hands of a select few. And now she was part of it. As the days passed, Alexis found herself spending more time with Commander Terran. The bond, however distant and forced it may have felt at first, was beginning to take shape in ways she hadn't expected. She still wasn't comfortable with it. How could she be? Being mentally and emotionally linked to someone she barely knew, someone who held so much power over the colony, was unsettling to say the least. But as the days wore on, she couldn't deny that something was changing between them. It wasn't love. It wasn't even close. But there was a strange kind of understanding, a connection that neither of them had expected. In private meetings and late-night discussions, Alexis began to see the man behind the title, behind the cold exterior. Terran wasn't just the detached, unapproachable leader everyone believed him to be. He was a man burdened by the same system he had once embraced. He had his own doubts, his own struggles, and Alexis began to see that he, too, was trapped in this game. The more she learned about him, the more Alexis began to question everything she thought she knew about the colony. Terran was not the monster she had imagined. He was a man who had inherited a broken system and had been forced to play his part in it. But that didn't make him any less dangerous. His power was real, and it was a power he was willing to use to maintain control. As the bond between them deepened, Alexis found herself at a crossroads. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to make her own decisions. But now, everything felt out of her hands. The bond wasn't just a link between her and Terran. It was a chain, one that connected her to the colony's very foundation, to the system that had been built to control and manipulate. She had tried to resist. She had tried to fight it, but the more she fought, the stronger the bond became. It was as if the more she rejected it, the more it rooted itself into her mind. She could feel Terran's presence even when he wasn't near, his thoughts, his emotions, intertwining with hers. It was like he was always with her, always watching, always guiding her. It was both comforting and suffocating at the same time. Alexis knew that she couldn't keep playing the game forever. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that the colony's system was just and fair. But she also knew that if she acted too soon, if she exposed the truth too quickly, the consequences would be dire. The colony wasn't a place where rebels were tolerated. It was a place where dissent was crushed before it had a chance to grow. So she bided her time. She observed, she listened, and she waited for the right moment. The right moment to make her move, to break free from the system that had held her captive for so long. One evening, as she sat in her apartment trying to make sense of everything, she received an unexpected visit from Kalen. He didn't knock. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked in, his face set in its usual unreadable expression. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice steady. "I was starting to wonder if you were going to make a move." Alexis stood up, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Kalen's eyes narrowed slightly, though his voice remained calm. "I know what you're thinking. You've always been a fighter, but you have to understand this is bigger than you. It's bigger than any of us. You can't just take on the whole colony by yourself." "I'm not trying to take on the whole colony," Alexis replied, her voice firm. "But I won't sit back and let it control me. Not anymore." Kalen took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "And what do you plan to do? Expose the system, turn everyone against each other. You think the people will rise up against the leaders of the colony?" "It's not that simple. I don't know what will happen," Alexis said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "But I can't just stay quiet. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay." Kalen sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly as though the weight of the world was pressing down on him. "I understand, but you have to realize something. If you make a move, there will be no turning back. You'll be marked as a traitor. The colony won't forgive you." "And Terran," he trailed off, his voice becoming softer, almost regretful. "Terran won't forgive you." Alexis's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Terran's name. She had already begun to understand that Terran was more than just a pawn in this game. He was as much a part of the system as anyone else, but the thought of him turning against her, it made her stomach twist. "I have to do something," Alexis whispered, more to herself than to Kalen. "I can't live with myself if I don't try." Kalen was silent for a long moment before he spoke again. "Then be careful, Alexis. If you're going to make a move, do it carefully. Make sure you have the support you need. You're not the only one who wants to change things. There are others who feel the same way, but they're afraid to act. You're not alone in this, but you need to tread carefully. The wrong move and everything will come crashing down. Alexis nodded slowly, her mind spinning with the possibilities. She knew Kaelin was right. This wasn't something she could do alone. She needed allies, people who were willing to stand with her, people who were ready to take down the system that had controlled them for so long. But where would she find them? And how could she trust anyone in a colony built on lies and deception? Kaelin turned to leave, but then stopped at the door. He glanced back at Alexis, his expression softer than it had been before. "You're strong, Alexis. I know you'll find a way. But don't forget, there's a lot at stake here. Not just for you, but for everyone. Make sure you're ready for what comes next." With those final words, Kaelin left, leaving Alexis alone with her thoughts. As the days passed, Alexis began to notice more subtle shifts in the way the colony was reacting to her. People who had once avoided her gaze were now offering support, nodding to her in quiet solidarity. Whispers of rebellion had started to spread, but they were carefully guarded whispers, whispers of those who, like her, had seen the cracks in the colony's system. Alexis realized that Kaelin had been right. She wasn't alone in her desire for change. But she also knew that making the wrong move could cost her everything. The time had come to make a decision. But what would she choose? And could she trust the people around her? The answers were still unclear, but one thing was certain. The future of the colony and her place within it would be determined by the choices she made in the coming days.